This episode, the Handyman Pros discuss Larry's retaining wall. The Handyman Pros have a discussion about Larry's little home project, a small retaining wall. Larry might be lying there. A couple of tips and tricks along with a few things you need to know about retaining walls. Welcome to the Handyman Pros Radio Show. Home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Handyman Pros Radio Show, where our goal is to help save you time, money, and aggravation on your home maintenance and repair. This edition's entitled Retaining Walls. We're going to call this a primer on retaining walls. To help me explain, I'm here with my ever-cheerful co-host and old buddy, John. John?
Yeah.
Are
Yes.
you telling me a story about something that's happened this week? Because that's usually how we open this show.
Let's see. A fable.
A fable.
Yeah, so what I did this past week, and I'm sure everybody out there has been faced with this in the past, is I was working on a little job here. It wasn't so little, but one of my neighbors had the soffit and fascia just fell in. It was quite the mess. It was probably about a 2-foot. It was just a real mess. And what it was is that, we always talk about it, is the downspout was completely clogged.
Ugh.
It was a nice sunny day. We had a lot of rain, but he's got these great big, these like 6-inch gutters. I mean, they're good sized gutters. But I was surprised that the downspout was so clogged up. It was just holding the water. I mean, you couldn't plug that thing any better than the way it was plugged.
So did you get a gusher when you took the thing apart?
Oh, there must have been 20 gallons. I mean, the whole backside of this new addition, or this addition that they had put on this house, must have drained through this thing. And it just came rolling down there like you couldn't believe. But in the meantime, over all this time, and I've always recommended to him and strongly to have his gutters cleaned out. And I guess not.
Yeah.
And
it caused additional damage, right? It caused damage to his soffits.
A lot of damage because of the way they built this thing, and I won't go into any details on it, but the way they built this addition, and the water just rolled back behind the gutter, and just started to
do what water does.
Do what it does.
Water does.
Rots away everything on and it got inside his fascia and the soffit, and next thing you know, the whole thing just collapsed. The
next thing you know, John, it has a job making money, and there you go.
Rebuilding 2x4s up there, everything. It was a nightmare from that perspective. But anyways,
so what does this have to do with a retaining wall? You ask, pray tell, and I'm going to tell you.
We're rolling into this thing, right? And that is, Larry, I saw that you had built this retaining wall.
Yes,
your driveway. So I thought this might be a good thing to bring up. And why don't you fill us in on what you've been doing?
Yeah. So I want to just give the background on this. So we just had our driveway report after 50 years. By the way, folks, concrete does have a lifespan, about 50 years. But anyway, we had a drainage issue in the yard, and the water would come across our old driveway and actually would land pretty much on our walkway going into our home. And this really became a muddy, nasty mess. And folks, if you don't know, here in Atlanta, we've had a relatively wet winter this year. I'll call it relatively wet. But we just got really tired of having this we had a pothole right in front of our walkway coming into the home, and it was a mud pit, and it was terrible. And anyway, long story short, I wanted to remediate. They poured the new driveway, and I wanted to remediate the water. And the water comes from, it's groundwater that comes out of the ground. When it rains hard, we live in an area that I believe, and I can say this because we actually hit this, we have a slab of granite underneath our hillside that we live on. Our home is based kind of on a hillside, and underneath that, about 36 inches under, there's a slab of granite, and I think it's part of Stone Mountain because that's happens around here. And the water comes up out of the ground up in my yard above my driveway, and it has ever since we've owned this home. It's only been recently that it's gotten really bad. I tried to do some remediation before. I think I actually made it worse. probably. I'm going to say I probably did. I tried digging in trenches and making French drains and doing all this stuff. And it works. It just didn't work really, really well. So when we had the driveway redone, we wanted to widen our driveway up too. It's a long story. But anyway, we widened up the driveway, and it was time to put a retaining wall in. Now, I've built retaining walls before. And so when John said, let's do the show, and I think I posted a picture out on the Facebook group too as well, of my small little retaining wall, which is not small. It's about 90 feet long. It's just a tad under 100 feet long. And it's about 4 bricks thick at the highest point. So these are commercial landscape bricks. So with that, we're going to have a little talk about building retaining walls, Johnny. So I wanted to have you start. Let's talk about why to build a retaining wall. What do you think?
Well, that's what I was asking you, because it looked like it was. It looked like it was quite a project, in all seriousness. So, and folks, if you don't know what Larry's referring to as Stone Mountain, you can look that up on the net. It's a big mountain made of stone,
of granite. Yeah, it's solid granite.
So it's appropriately named here in Atlanta. But anyways. Yeah, I've got a couple of places that I'd really like to put a retaining wall myself, because just the way my yard slopes off, and I want to these things are definitely you see them all the time as tiered levels and things like that, right?
Correct. Yep.
And looking at the picture that you had posted on Facebook, it looks like a great solution to all that water and all the mud and the landscape, hold it back.
And it's still not done yet. It's a long story. We are in the middle of the shortage supply, so I can't get the cap bricks on, but we're going to grade it all out. It'll end up being really, really nice. We're going to turn it into kind of dirt thing. So the picture is not in a complete picture yet, but we're close. But yeah, so the purpose of retaining walls is for a number of reasons, but it's mostly to kind of contain slopes, to contain dirt moving down a hillside usually, to reduce dips and inclines, to kind of hold back earth, and then it also can be used for drainage to move water where you want it to move, right? So in my case, I'm doing it for, I think, really all of those reasons. So because of the side hill, we have our earth that moves a little bit, we're talking over the period of years. And I had a drainage issue, so I wanted to repair the drainage issue. And then actually we are going to terrace that area up, and we're going to actually add a little bit to it and make a fire pit area. So I'll post some pictures when I get to that part, but I'm a long way from that part. But that is the purpose of retaining walls. Now, I do want to just say one thing about retaining walls. We're not talking about retaining walls that are 100 feet high here. We're talking about retaining walls that are maybe 5 feet high. The reason that I mention that is that there's a lot of different technologies that go into retaining walls, and some of them have liability issues and so forth and so on, and we're not getting into that. We're not getting into great big ones. But we're going to talk about kind of small ones and materials that are easy to get a hold of. Does that work for you, Johnny?
Yeah. Yes, it does. So tell us about these landscaping blocks you're talking about, and the cap things that you're waiting for. If you're not familiar with all that, what exactly is that material that you're using there? How did you get it on site? How heavy is it? Can I describe that?
Yeah. So let's take a step back. Let's talk about what can you make a retaining wall out of, right? There's tons and tons of different products. You can use natural stone if you happen to have some around, or you have a lot, I guess, depending on the size of the wall you want. You can use concrete. You could actually pour concrete, or you can use concrete blocks, or you can use lumber, or you can use frumber, which is fake lumber, things like that. You can use anything that you can structurally build a wall. You can make a retaining wall out of. Now, I have a preference towards stone and concrete products, largely because, folks, when you build a stone product, it's pretty much there forever, for the most part, probably 50 or 60 years that it will be there. Lumber, John, we see a lot of homes built with lumber retaining walls, right?
Well, we ran into a couple. One, the famous one up on the lake. Was a complete disaster, a mess.
Yeah,
and that was a pretty big project too.
Yeah, and the base problem with lumber is I don't care how well you treat lumber. I don't care what kind of lumber you use. Eventually, the water gets to it and it rots. Okay, so if you want to do a short-term wall, if you're just thinking short-term, like less than 20 years, have a blast with lumber. lumber it just doesn't do well sitting in the ground, in my opinion. John and I have experienced many walls that are made of lumber and folks, removing a wall is extremely difficult, especially if it's a taller wall. So the taller the wall, the more it needs to be made out of concrete or some kind of stone product or concrete blocks, or of some sort. And when I'm referring to concrete blocks, I'm not talking about cinder blocks. I'm talking about they actually make concrete paver blocks, or not paver blocks, but they're retaining wall blocks that are interlock and things like that. So in this case, I used commercial grade blocks. They are big. They are 19 or 18 inches long. They're about 9 inches tall. They weigh at least 70 pounds. They weigh more than a bag of concrete. I know that because my back is telling me that they weigh that. If you're going to do a retaining wall, I don't care. If you're going to do it yourself, put your exercise clothes on, because this is a lot of just basically hard work, right? It's not difficult work. It's just hard, heavy physical work, because the materials are heavy. Just period. You're doing a lot of digging. I depending on the grade and things, you might want to use a piece of equipment. You might want to rent a piece of equipment. In my case, the guys that had poured the driveway had actually taken a bobcat and had pushed the wall back, because I asked them to, because they had the equipment here anyway. So they actually took the dirt and pushed the dirt up the hill and put it up on top, because in case you didn't know this, it's easier to pull dirt downhill than it is to carry it uphill. So I had them build a berm up on the top side so that when I built the wall, I can pull the dirt down. But yeah, depending on how big and on how much doing. Now, if you're doing a small accent wall where you're gonna fill in a little dip or something, and you're gonna do it 4 or 5 feet long, and it's gonna be 3 or 4 bricks high. No, you don't need a piece of equipment to do that. But if you're gonna do a bigger wall like what I did in this case, you're probably gonna need a piece of equipment. But go rent a piece of equipment, because John, there's no much more fun than riding around on a bobcat or a backhoe or something, or a track hoe and building a wall.
The neighbors.
Actually, my neighbor's looking forward to the next time I get the piece of equipment in here, because he's got a little drainage project he wants me to dig for him. So I was like, oh, cool. It gives me another reason to actually go get a piece, which I do need another piece of equipment, because the amount of dirt I have to move is not going to be done by hand, because Larry's feeling old. But yeah, that's the materials. So like I say, you can go to the big box stores and you can get retaining wall bricks, and they actually have some, I call them light commercial bricks too, that are bigger than the traditional little ones, that you get there. I don't know if I'm describing them properly. Am I describing them properly, John? But these bricks have a lip.
Yeah, go. Let me pause you there a second. So where do you get these? If you didn't go through that already, where do you get these bricks specifically?
So if you want the commercial grade stuff, look up under landscape supplies and look up retaining wall bricks, and there'll be several people in your area that will sell them. And I will say this: ask them. They will ask you the distance. They will ask you how high you want, and they'll give you recommendations on how many bricks you actually need. They also deliver, and please, unless you're doing a very small wall. So mine was 7 pallets of bricks. Okay, it's basically the tandem axle truck came in with the forklift on back, and it dropped off 7 pallets of bricks. And 7 pallets of bricks, folks, that's about 50,000 pounds. Just saying.
Right.
This isn't how wonderful is Larry. It's like, actually, Larry said, "Oh my God, I think I'm out of my flipping mind."
Right.
But be that as it may, they brought them in and they dropped them off. And I will give you this. Here's a pro tip here, folks. Now, I couldn't do this because they had just poured my driveway, and I didn't want them running a forklift with a 3,000-pound pallet of bricks on my driveway. If you can, have the bricks spread out along where you're going to run them. I had to put them up the hill, so I had to carry all of them down to the wall. Not so much fun. I actually put them on the trailer and did it that way, but after the driveway dried all the way. But have them delivered close to where you're working. That's just one of the good tips I'll give you. But that's where I got them from, John. But they are available. There are smaller ones. If you're you're doing a small accent landscape wall, they make little ones that are probably, I don't know, they're probably 10 inches wide and about 4 inches thick, and they're at the Home Depot. They're at Home Depot or Lowe's, and they've got a lip on them. They all have a lip on them, and the lip is designed so that they interlock, so that when you lay them in, they hold against each other, and then in that way they actually form a structural footing behind it, right? I mean, a structural strength in the wall itself. So,
right. Right. So that's what I want to get across to everybody. Is that, the ones that you're describing aren't the ones that are in Home Depot, and you got to go down to a place that's got all the rock and all that stuff hanging around. We've all seen those stores, those places someplace.
Yep.
So
they really are wonderful. I mean, they're very easy to work with. They're super strong. Like, you build this wall, it's literally it's a 50, 60, maybe 100-year wall. In all seriousness, on a 4 or 5 foot high wall. So,
right. So you start off and you're looking at this and you say, okay, well, this is the materials that I want. Now you had some other things like these footings, right? You got to put in something, right? Is that right?
So let's just go back to the part of the planning thing is what by regulation, who is involved in this project, right? So, meaning, do you need a permit? Do you need an engineer involved? And I'm talking about something a little bigger.
Right.
What's your homeowners association say? All of these kinds of things. So, first thing to do is check your local ordinances. Now, for me, I went to the building. The county that I live in has a building ordinance thing, and they post this stuff online. So I looked online. I can build a wall 6 feet or less with no permit.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So if I'm 6 feet or less, I can build with no permit. There are some incredible resources out there online. So if you're going to do a 6 foot wall is very different than a 3 foot wall, as you can imagine. But there's allenblock.com is one of these people, but they have a free app that you can download that'll tell you, like, they'll give you dimensions and they'll give you some of that engineering stuff for that 6 foot or less wall that can be pretty invaluable. As you get higher up in the wall, you need to tie the wall into the earth behind it, and there's several different ways to do that. There's actually a reinforcing fabric that you can lay dirt over that'll tie you lay it on the top, like at 3 feet you lay in a piece of this fabric, and it goes back about 36 inches into the earth as you lay the earth, and it ties everything together. It's pretty amazing stuff.
Right.
Like in wood, they take timbers and they run timbers horizontal or perpendicularly to the wall, and they run them back into the dirt,
back into the
earth for the same reason.
There. That's and that just brings me, that when I think about what you just said there, that brings me back to that story of that wooden retaining wall that was about to fall down.
Yep.
We looked at that and said, no, I don't want to get anywhere close to that thing.
Yeah, no. It as you get down the road, it becomes very, very difficult. You're going to need, you need equipment. You basically have to rebuild the whole side of the hill, and that's just not a whole lot of fun, at all.
Right.
Now, I've seen 25-year-old brick walls using these walls that I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need anything, nothing. I mean, if they're built right in the first place, they don't need anything. Anyway, be that as it may. So permits. So permits. Check your HOA. Right. Of course, your HOA can make your life miserable if you have one, or they can be your friend. It just sort of depends. The other one is anytime you're dealing and digging in the earth, call DigSafe. It's 811. Just dial 811. They'll come out and mark where your utilities and all of the pertinent stuff is in your yard.
Right.
Show them where you're going to do it.
Because you don't know anybody that's actually cut through like a cable, have you?
I might have known a guy that cut the TV cable one time. Yeah, maybe.
So yeah, anytime, folks, you dig in you put a shovel in the ground or anything, know where that thing is going, because you don't want to hit a gas pipe, electrical line, your cable, your internet, whatever you might have underneath there, because you won't believe what's underneath.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. Water lines, you name it, all of that stuff. And so it doesn't cost you anything either. DigSafe does not cost. So they send people out because that's just what they do. Actually,
cost avoidance.
It's cost of, well, yeah, it actually, so just the wife works for a large telecommunications company, and if you hit the wrong cable in their world, it's like a $2.5 million event. Like, you hit a major line. It's a big deal. So don't do it. Even you think, oh, it's just to my house, it won't matter. Folks, you cut your electric line along with electrocuting yourself, you've got a big problem. You really do.
Right. Well, even guys, down the street in my neighborhood were digging, putting in a new electrical line, and they actually hit the gas pipe.
Yeah, and you've got a big problem.
You got a big problem. And anytime you hit a gas pipe, I'll tell you, folks, if you've never seen this before, If you hit a gas pipe, number one, you can't believe the response from the gas company. I mean, it'll get there quicker than you can call the cops. I mean, they are
true
there
statement.
They are there with multiple trucks, and you think there's a massive attack or something going on. It's crazy, but besides that, you don't want that thing to light up either while you hit that gas pipe.
Didn't your neighbors light up, Johnny?
I saw a utility company when they were planning. They ran an auger into the ground to put in a new telephone pole, and they hit the gas line and sparked it, and it lit up, and it actually killed a guy, in a bucket, and the flames were higher than they must have been probably, I want to say 25, 30 feet in the air out of that thing.
Yeah, I remember seeing video of that.
So it gets quite crazy. So, once again, I don't want to harp on this, but,
call Dig Safe.
Call
811.
Call Dig Safe.
Just dial 811.
You make your life a lot happier.
Yeah. And again, it's free. It's free. So don't hesitate to do that. All right. So anyway, so with that, so those are your ideas, and your local municipalities will tell you if you need a permit or whatever, and if you need an engineer. Now, in most cases, if you're doing just kind of what I would call a relatively simple wall, and mine was a relatively simple wall. It just was big. It was long, but I never went more than 4 bricks high. So 4 bricks is about 3.5 feet, just to give you an idea. And at 3.5 feet, technically, according to what the resources online say, I should have put reinforcing in. I didn't, because it's right at the edge. It's right at the very edge. If I was 1 more brick high, I would have put a reinforcing layer of fabric in there, but I just didn't feel it was necessary. Plus, I don't have much earth movement on the side of the hill. Most of it is water, so I'm not all that worried about it pushing the wall over, because it's right at the very, very edge. If I had a steeper grade, I probably would have, but I don't. I have it's about a 30-degree grade. It's not really super steep. So
yeah, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So when you were doing this, it sounds like you really kind of laid this thing out in a project management type of style, right?
I did.
By that I mean you're really thinking through this whole thing, and I think that's something that we want to impart here on the listeners, is that going into something like this, it's not extremely difficult, but you just really need to plan it out and understand what kind of materials, what kind of tools that you need, kind of what you're getting yourself into, but to make the whole project a success, right? Proper planning, right?
Absolutely, yeah. You always, John, you and I, we talk about it all the time. We're planners, right? So we want to plan this stuff. I will tell you, in this project, you want to plan because you want to plan your product movement, because it's heavy and you want to move it as little as possible.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. Going on your theory, Professor, it's easier to move those bricks in the dirt downhill than it is uphill.
Exactly.
So.
And one other thing that I will say, you will also need some rock. So you will need some what they call 5s and 7 rocks, or some drainage rock. I called up a friend of mine's got a dump truck, and he brought me over a tandem load of 5s and 7s, which is quarry rock. It's just the gray drainage rock, and you will need that because the bricks that I purchased are hollow. So they have like a cinder block, but it's bigger, so they have an open space in the middle, and you have to fill those with the rock. It helps to tie the wall together, but it also gives drainage for the wall. And then I always put in behind the wall as well. I put about a 4-inch layer of rock behind the wall, and in this case, I ran some piping through that 4-inch area of rock because of the water. Because I have groundwater, folks. I've got a lot of. It's not a lot, but it's enough groundwater coming out that I want to make sure it has a place to go, and it actually runs out and around the driveway and drains off into my side yard, where I would like my water to go, not across my driveway to my walkway to go into my home, right? So the reason for most of this job was because of that. But you're going to put a general rule of thumb. You're going to put about 4 inches of gravel behind the wall, and then any water that drains down the grade and goes into that gravel, it creates this huge evaporation bed. If you think about it, the wall is however big the wall is. Now you've taken and you've made the wall. The bricks themselves are 9 inches deep. So you have about 12 inches of I call it evaporative space. I don't know where I get that from, but the water goes, I've watched it, the water goes in there when it really, really rains hard. Sometimes the front of the wall will weep. It just weeps a little water, but it evaporates right off, And that's kind of, now again, I'm dealing in the south too. I don't know how these things work in the north, so I am going to say, if you're doing this in northern climates, I remember enough of it to know about living in the north that a lot of that is going to have to do with digging a footer, which we'll get to in a minute. But here in the south, we don't necessarily have to dig deep footers for this. But if I was in an area where the ground really heaved, I would not want to be below the frost line.
Right.
So, again, I'm dealing with a southern place where we don't have a frost line because we don't have a frost line. And so the initial row of bricks is basically about 4 inches underground. And again, if I were in the north, I would be making sure it is probably below the frost line or it's going to heave and pitch. You know how the ice is, John. You remember, right?
Try to.
Try to forget.
Try to forget. Thanks for bringing that back.
Yeah, I used to when I was young, I worked in the fencing industry.
Right back there.
Yeah, when I was young, I worked in the fencing industry, and if you didn't dig below the frost line, you'd go out to your fence line at the end of a year, and the freaking thing would be punked. Half the posts would be out of the ground, and so anyway, same thing in a wall. Again, localities. Ask the local guys; they'll tell you. If you're buying your brick from the local guy at wherever you are, he's going to tell you how deep you need to go. Or he's going to tell you pour a concrete footer, and lay your bricks on top of the concrete kind of thing. You can do that as well. Now, again, I'm going to go to it. So here in Georgia, we only need to go about 4 inches into the ground. So I've laid my and folks, I'm going to talk about the biggest issue when you're laying a wall. It's really simple. You're going to spend about 90% of your time putting the first course in, right? The first row. Right, John?
Yep.
So that row, the first row, it's the foundation, if you want to call it that. The first row is the tough one. It needs to be level, and it needs to be level both ways. So horizontally and, well, it's vertically isn't really the right statement, but left and right and front and back. It needs to be vertical.
Right.
Or horizontal, excuse me.
Otherwise, what happens? You get to the end of this thing and
your wall has waves in it.
And the wall has waves in it,
and it
looks awful,
and it looks terrible, right? So every line should be horizontal and perfect and beautiful. And to do that, so this goes back to planning, John. Where do you think you start this project?
Well, you got to start somewhere, right? So you started where? At the beginning?
You start at the beginning. It's what we pay Johnny the big money for, folks.
No, I was going to ask you, did you put like stakes in the ground and then like run a string line?
So,
to level that off?
I did not, and the reason that I did in this case, so this is the second big wall I've done. So the first big wall I did was down behind my house, and that one I did stake out a line. Okay.
Yeah.
This one I did not stake out the line for one reason and one reason alone. It runs parallel to the driveway. So I use the driveway itself. The edge of the driveway is my delineation line. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
So
yes. Yep.
So normally, if this were not for if I wasn't following the driveway and say I was just building a wall, I was building a wall across my yard because I wanted to make a patio deck or something like that. No, I would have a line. I would actually take string lines and put it out there and have it be nice and straight, unless the line had a curve in it. But even if it has a curve in it, I'm going to put posts in the curve, and I'm going to use the curve line as a basis to do the work on, right? In this case, I was just working off the driveway. So that was how I did this one, but again, lay out a string line. But when I say where do you start, the first thing you do is actually lay out where are you going to put this thing? So this wall. And at that point, you have to determine the place that you start your excavation, we'll call it that, start your digging, is at the lowest point, right? Mm-hmm. So your first row needs to start at the lowest point. And if you're working in an area that has uneven topography, which most of the time that's what you're doing. Go to the lowest point. That's where you put your first row. And your first row might only be 2 bricks long. It might be 3 bricks long. It just depends, again, on the topography. In my case, my first row was pretty long. It was probably 40 feet, because it just paralleled the driveway. So, and then I stacked above that. Now, my driveway pitches up on the one end, and so my rows climb up as we go out. But we did a step down, and I'll shoot some pictures and put them out on the Facebook group and put them, out so people can see it when we get more. There is a picture out there now, so one picture. But anyway, you always start at the lowest points and get that first row perfect. Get the first row perfect. And after you get your first row perfect, then it's just laying your bricks. Boom, 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 and they get laid on. That goes pretty rapidly until you start climbing a hill, and then you have what's an old row plus a new row, so that when you get out to where the elevation rises, now you're back to laying a first row again. And it needs to be nice and square and level and square. And there's lots of resources out there online on exactly how to do that. I don't have really time to go into it, in a half-hour show. But it's not difficult. It's basically digging.
Let me ask you this. Let me pause you there. So,
yep.
You've gone through a lot of great points here, and how to do this and the materials and things. And how long did it take you? Now, I saw the picture. How long did it take you to get to where that picture was taken?
Forever. No, it takes. That's about where the picture is right now. Is about 3 weeks of part-time work.
Yeah, of course.
About 3 weeks of part-time work. So
I
came home.
How many hours do you think you got into that?
Probably 40 to 50. Right now. Now, remember, folks, this is a big wall. This is 90 feet long.
Yeah, that's a big wall. I was going to say you said it was like 90.
It's about 90 feet long.
How long did you say?
90 feet.
Yeah, 90 feet long. So that's a big wall. But to put something in that might be, somewhere similar to that might be, a third of that size. A
30-foot wall. You have a good 3-day project. Probably by the time you get it all said and done.
Yeah.
And that doesn't include obtaining your materials. That's just of your actual work. And again, it depends how high you're going and how much dirt you actually have to move to. Because again, do you have a piece of equipment or not, and things like that. And I actually will finish this up with a piece of equipment. So I'm going to get a tractor and do my grading will be done with a tractor and a bucket, so that I can actually, smooth things out and get it really nice. Because it's many, many, many tons. So I've probably moved, and it's not a bragging, trust me, I feel it every day. I've probably moved 70 tons of material. Because it was 34,000 pounds, or it was 17 tons of rock they dropped, and I've moved a good 2/3 of that. And then they dropped the 7 pallets of brick, which we've only used 6, but still, each one of those is about 3,000 pounds. So 6 times 3 is 18,000. So yeah, I moved a lot of weight.
Wow. So I shouldn't be bitching about putting a fan up then, I guess.
No. It's kind of a young man's game, folks. I'm going to tell you. Mid-50s is not the idea of yes, I'm scratching my head saying, why did I do this? But I'll tell you the reason why I did it. There is a reason, because I'm very frugal and I hate paying for labor. But the other side is I wanted to make sure it's absolutely positively done right. And in most of my projects that I do for myself, and I know John does the same thing, I know the guy. I know how he does his work. I know he tends to over-engineer things. Like, I put 2 layers of pipe in this thing. No professional would put 2 layers of pipe into my drainage system because they just go, you don't need it. But for me, because it's my labor, it's like I just bought the pipe. So it's just the pipe. I don't, it's pennies on the dollar for me to put it in. So I put 2 layers of pipe in. So when the water comes into the backside of the wall, in my 4-inch gravel that I put in the back, there's 2 layers of pipe that have pitched that run the water off around the driveway. I did that because I had such a water, it was just, anyway, it was the biggest reason. But for me to do that, it didn't cost me a whole lot other than a little bit of labor and the parts, and that was it. So why not? For me, right?
That sounds good. What a great primer for a retaining wall discussion. We certainly the folks out there, if you love to hear your comments on this as well. If you've done this kind of thing, honestly, I try to stay away from that. Just due to my back. When I was a younger guy, it wasn't a big deal. Now it's like, yeah, no. So that's why I don't, don't do that kind of thing anymore.
Technically, my wife's sons were supposed to help me, but they amazingly got sick that weekend.
Hence the word technically. So, no doubt. Well, that was great, Larry.
Well, thank you, John.
Fantastic. That was great.
So, John.
Yes.
Are we telling our friends and neighbors and everybody to go and have our friends listen to the Handyman Pros Radio Show?
We are.
I think, folks, if you've enjoyed this show, please tell everybody you know. John,
Exactly.
John and I try to be pretty entertaining, and we try to give you good value. So we hope that's true. If you have any,
leave us a 5-star review too, if you can.
Blah blah blah. Yeah, send us an email actually, and we would appreciate that more. John, we were reading that we're going to do this as a tip one of these days. But did you know the number of UFO sightings is up?
Big time. Big time.
You know why?
Why?
Because every time one lands in your yard, you're forever taking the damn thing apart.
Yeah, they're running out of parts. It reminds me the last time I called DigSafe, when I called 811, I think the alien did show up.
See?
So, don't tell me there's no aliens.
Hey, I saw one on my retaining wall the other day. I don't know. She always shows up in the strangest places. Anyway.
That's right, folks. You got to look on the Facebook page to see it.
So there you go. Folks, we appreciate it. Thanks for listening. We're going to see you next week on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.